Now let's go ahead and bring in Lewis Nelson in our Washington bureau. He's a reporter for Politico. Lewis, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about the Iran nuclear deal. What responsibility does Congress have now that the president did not certify the agreement?
So the president has sort of essentially punted the fate of the Iran nuclear deal to Congress. Congress, like you said, has 60 days to work on this legislation, or work on the deal, rather, work on the nuclear agreement. It's a step that that is prompting a discussion among Republicans on this legislation that has been sort of proposed by Senators Bob Corker and Tom Cotton, two prominent Republicans in the sort of foreign policy space, that would put into place additional sanctions having to do, or the threat of additional sanctions rather, having to do with certain sunset clauses towards the end of the nuclear deal, certain sanctions that would be triggered not just by nuclear activity, but also things having to do with Iran's other behavior that the U.S. sort of doesn't like, things like its behavior regionally in terms of funding groups that the U.S. views as terrorist groups, things like that.
All right, Lewis, as a candidate, Mr. Trump often said he would rip up the nuclear deal, but his action, of course, doesn't go that far. Can the president portray his announcement Friday as a promise kept?
He certainly, I would be stunned if he didn't, and that's certainly so far how he seems to be portraying it, as tearing up the nuclear deal, or at least making good on his sort of stated displeasure, even if he's not exactly ripping up the nuclear deal. He's certainly putting it in jeopardy.
All right, let's go and talk health care now, if we can. The president took 2 steps to undermine the Affordable Care Act. How much political pressure is on Republicans to step in and cover these health care subsidies?
You know, I think it's hard to say how much Republicans are going to feel responsible for this. What the president would like is for Democrats to feel responsible with this. He has long said that even if he's unable to do away with Obamacare via repeal and replace, the other option that he's sort of put forward is just to let Obamacare collapse, which he thinks it will do. He often says it's in a death spiral, which he then says will force Democrats to the negotiating table, because they'll, he says Democrats own this and they'll be the ones who have to, feel the impetus to fix it. So we'll see. I think the president's idea is that Democrats are now going to feel pressured to do something about this.
All right, let's talk about the Russia investigation, if we can. Special counsel Robert Mueller on Friday interviewed former White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. As the investigation seems to get closer and closer to the Oval Office, what position is the Trump White House in right now?
Well, I talked to Reince Priebus on Friday. Investigators from Robert Mueller's team did. That's one of several West Wing interviews that the Mueller investigation, Mueller's team is planning to do. Former Press Secretary Sean Spicer is one. White House counsel Don McGahn is one. Hope Hicks, who works in the communications office, is another one. So people working in the West Wing, people working in prominent roles in the West Wing are expected to be interviewed as part of this. It's an indication that people high up in the White House, in the Trump administration, are under scrutiny, are under investigation, or a part of this investigation involved with Russia. The president himself has yet to be accused of any wrongdoing, though, but certainly high-level people in the White House are involved.
All right, Lewis, want to get a final topic and final question in for you. NBC News reports that Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, had a $60 million relationship with a Russian oligarch, suggesting a stronger connection than previously reported. What does Manafort's own future mean for the White House?
Well, Paul Manafort is sort of the key guy, or one of the key guys in all of this. He was Donald Trump's campaign chairman for a big chunk of the summer. Basically, in effect, his campaign manager running the president's presidential campaign. And he is, I think also probably it's fair to say, the person in the sort of Trump orbit that has the closest or the strongest ties to Russia, to key Russian figures, to this sort of Russian circle of oligarchs who play a key role in the Russian government and in the sort of ruling class of Russia, so to speak. There's no, or not necessarily a smoking gun here yet, so to speak, but $60 million is a big number for Manafort to be tied to Russia, tied to key Russian figures and officials with that sort of a number. It sort of adds smoke, even if there hasn't been the discovery of fire quite yet.
All right, Lewis Nelson in Washington. Lewis, always good to see you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Anytime.
All right, thank you.